The dam has not been rebuilt. That is the last thing you need to know before this story starts. The Teton Dam in southeastern Idaho failed on June 5th, 1976. 11 people died. 13,000 cattle drowned. $2 billion in damage across 5 counties. And the dam that caused all of it has never been rebuilt. Because what stood on that stretch of the Teton River should never have been built in the first place. June 3rd, 1976, southeastern Idaho. An inspection crew walks the downstream face of the dam. The reservoir has been filling for 8 months. The water behind the dam is 270 feet deep. One of the crew members stops. He looks down. Clear water is seeping from the ground. 2 spots. One at 1,300 feet from the dam. One at 1,500 feet. He thinks this is probably fine, but he writes it in the log. The next day, June 4th, a third seep appears, 150 feet further downstream. Still clear water, still logged, still not acted on decisively. The Bureau of Reclamation monitors the seeps, but nobody calls for an emergency drawdown of the reservoir. Nobody orders an evacuation of the valley below. Therefore, the water behind the dam keeps rising, 3 feet per day. Saturday morning, June 5th, 8:30 in the morning. A worker on the downstream face notices something different. The seepage is no longer clear. It is muddy. He reports it immediately. By 9 a.m., a sinkhole has opened on the downstream slope. Water is coming through a void in the embankment. Bulldozers are sent in to plug the hole with riprap. But the hole is not plugging. The water coming through is not seeping anymore. It is flowing, then roaring. The bulldozers are pulled back before they are swallowed. At 11:55 in the morning, the dam breaches at the crest. 1 million cubic feet of water per second tears through the gap. The entire reservoir empties in under 6 hours. 80 billion gallons of water. The town of Wilford disappears under a 15-foot wall of water. Sugar City is hit. Rexburg, population 9,000, is flooded. 2/3 of its residents are left homeless. Thousands of logs from a lumber yard are ripped loose upstream. They slam into a bulk gasoline storage tank. The gasoline ignites. Flaming slicks ride the floodwater through the streets. The water travels 155 miles downstream. It takes 3 days to reach American Falls Dam. 11 people are dead. 13,000 cattle are gone. 250 businesses destroyed. 733 homes lost. But here is what makes the Teton Dam story different from a simple flood. The warnings existed before a single shovel of dirt was moved. Geologists who examined the site before construction identified the rock beneath the dam as highly fractured welded ash, volcanic rock from Yellowstone, 2.1 million years old, and cracked. Not just cracked. Fissures as wide as 6 feet ran through the right abutment, open voids that water would find as soon as the reservoir began to fill. Construction crews planned to fill those fractures with grout, but as they drilled, they kept finding larger and larger fractures. The grouting was insufficient. At a certain elevation, the grouting was stopped entirely. Nobody explained in the record why. Therefore, the right abutment of the dam was not adequately sealed under the impervious core. The Bureau of Reclamation had geologic warnings, not vague concerns. documented warnings about the permeability of the foundation, written before construction began in 1972. But the project moved forward. Congress had authorized the Teton Dam in 1964 without opposition. The dam would provide flood control, irrigation, and hydroelectric power to over 111,000 acres of Idaho farmland. That was the benefit. The risk sat in the geology report. The filling rate also concerned investigators after the fact. Regulations allowed 1 foot per day, but in March 1976, officials authorized 2 feet per day. By May, the reservoir was rising at 4.3 feet per day in peak periods. Investigators later determined the fast fill rate did not cause the failure, but the rock beneath the dam was always going to fail. The question was only when. Robert R. Robeson was the project engineer on site. He filed his incident report in the hours before the dam gave way. He wrote calmly and in formal language that the first leak was noticed at 8:30 in the morning, that it was slightly turbid, that the second leak was flowing at 50 cubic feet per second. By the time he finished writing that report, the dam was gone. The independent panel, convened by the Secretary of the Interior, issued its findings. The Teton Dam failed because the design did not adequately account for the site-specific geological conditions. It failed because there was inadequate communication between the design engineers and the construction crews about how to prepare the foundation. It failed because the grouting was insufficient and inconsistently applied. And it failed because nobody stopped it during the 48 hours, when the seeps appeared and the warning was sitting in the log. The panel also said something that mattered even more for the future. An independent peer review of the design might have caught the flaws before construction. In the days after the dam failed, something remarkable happened in the valley. More than 100,000 people had been in the path of the water. 11 died. That number is almost incomprehensibly low given the scale of the flood. It is low because of the men and women who drove through the valley that morning, warning people door to door. Sheriffs and deputies who did not wait for official evacuation orders. Local authorities who made calls on their own initiative and got people moving before the wall of water arrived. 10 of the 11 people who died had been warned. They made individual choices to stay. One person, a young man named David Benson, was fishing on a small island in the Teton River and never received any warning. He tried to swim to safety. His fishing partner survived. He did not. Tens of thousands of volunteers arrived in the weeks after the disaster. Church groups from Idaho, Utah, Montana, Wyoming, and Canada. Friends and family of the flood victims. In 2 months, they provided over 1 million hours of cleanup and restoration work. The communities rebuilt. Congress responded with legislation. President Gerald Ford signed the Teton Disaster Bill in September 1976, authorizing compensation for lost property. The Bureau of Reclamation paid nearly $500 million in claims, but the structural change mattered more than the money. The Bureau of Reclamation's Dam Safety Program was created directly out of the Teton failure. It established regular inspection requirements for all federal dams. It introduced advanced seepage monitoring technology. It created mandatory protocols for first fill monitoring, the period when a dam is most vulnerable, when a new reservoir is being filled for the very first time. Congress passed the Reclamation Safety of Dams Act in 1978. The independent review panel that investigated the Teton failure also called for something that had not existed before: External peer review of dam designs before construction. Not the same bureau reviewing its own work. Outside engineers. A second set of eyes that had no stake in the project moving forward. That standard is now part of how major federal water infrastructure is designed and approved. There are currently over 92,000 dams in the United States. The average age of those dams is 62 years. Many of them were built under standards less rigorous than the ones that exist today because of what happened on the Teton River. The Bureau of Reclamation's dam safety program has become, in the words of the Bureau itself, a model for dam safety programs around the world. Back in the valley, the cleanup volunteers finished their work. The college in Rexburg reopened in the fall. The farms recovered. The communities that had been battered by logs and fire and water found their footing again. The site of the Teton Dam is now accessible to visitors. The 2/3 of the dam wall that did not collapse still stands above the canyon. You can walk to it. You can see where the breach happened. You can see the fractured rhyolite on the right abutment that geologists had flagged before the first construction crew arrived. The crack was always there. The dam just made it matter. On June 3rd, 1976, a man on an inspection crew noticed 2 small seeps of clear water and wrote them in the log. He was not wrong to monitor them. He was not wrong to note them down. But nobody decided in the next 48 hours that the reservoir should stop filling. Nobody called for the evacuation of the valley below. Until the morning, the bulldozers were already pulling back from a hole they could not fill. The independent panel said an outside review might have caught it before construction. The seep said something was wrong 2 days before the breach. The geology said it before that. The question that every engineer working on a dam anywhere in the United States is now required to answer, formally and on the record, is the question the Teton Dam never got to ask. What happens if the foundation is not what we think it is? That question is now written into law. The dam has not been rebuilt, but the program it created is protecting every community that lives downstream of a federal dam today, and that is worth more than a rebuilt dam. The men and women who drove through that valley on the morning of June 5th did not wait for permission. The sheriffs and deputies who knocked on doors at 9 in the morning, with a wall of water still hours away but coming, made the call themselves. Get out now. That decision, made by people who did not have the full picture but had enough of it to act, is the reason the death toll was 11 and not 1,000. The volunteers who arrived afterward, over 1 million hours of work in 2 months, came because communities take care of each other when the official structures have not been adequate. The dam failed. The people did not. That is the full story of the Teton Dam. A geology report that was right. A design process that missed what the geology was saying. 48 hours of seeps that were monitored but not acted on. And a valley full of people who survived because other people moved fast enough to warn them. The law that came from it protects the next valley. The question that came from it is asked before the next dam is built, and the dam on the Teton River still stands in 2 pieces above the canyon, exactly where the water left it. The crack was always in the rock. Now the inspection protocols are always in the law.